Hey folks, taking a break on Sunday with geopolitics. Today is the 16th. I'm going to make this video today. It's going to be played out a little later depending on when I get time from putting out domestic politics, which is turning out to be extremely exciting. So here I am on Sunday. Bob with BBD. First concern, US concerned Russia prepping for invasion. This is Ukraine. So using Ukraine, Russia has played itself into great power politics, right? Because Europe is threatened, the United States has to take note, they're going to have to make concessions. The red line is essentially not allowing any of the Central European nations to join Europe, join NATO, and you know how the Europeans are taking that and how the United States is taking up a strong stand. But eventually, that's going to have to work, right? The person who's going to have a problem with a war in Ukraine, if it happens, is Turkey. Turkey is playing with fire. If on one side it's bought the S-400 from Russia, on the other side, you know what happened there. Azerbaijan had supported against Russian troops in Armenia, equipment in Armenia. Then in Ukraine they made a huge play. They're there, hook, line and sinker, and they're essentially helping the Crimean Tatars. So there is a problem there. That happens, and then the Russia has to worry about Turkey and the Chechens, and these are all interesting points that Turkey is trying to grow its footprint, and it runs against Russia, which it needs to kind of counterbalance the United States and NATO. So Erdogan is playing a difficult game, and I don't know when Raja Mohan said that these guys are out there as players. India at this point in time needn't worry about Turkey. I think they're in a mess, right? Then in China, military meet India hopes of positive dialogue. Right? So this is what you keep hearing. There's no dialogue possibility, folks. India to adopt cautious approach in border negotiations with China. What cautious approach? You know they're not going to agree to anything you say. China threat on, says army chief, rejects land border law. So this army chief, if you remember, when CDS, rest his soul in peace, was trying to play soft on China, this guy was the only guy, Chief Narwane, who was coming out hammer and tong against China, right? Conflict last resort, but ready for it, says army chief. India-China military talks failed to yield positive results. Hey, give me another one, same old story. No breakthrough in 13 hour China talks, but next meet soon. And this is the thing. Army chief talks tough on China. Now it's time for the political leadership to go back to the drawing board for a resolution. He said at a media briefing that wars are instruments of last resort, but India expects to emerge victorious if such a course is resorted to. And in the face of numerous reports of China beefing up its military infrastructure in disputed border regions, General Narawane made it clear that India too has bolstered its position enough to take on anything that is thrown at the country. More evidence is emerging that Chinese action to strengthen border infrastructure, including roads, bridges, airports, and missile positions, began in 2019, many months before the standoff date. This evidence suggests China's ultimate aim is to enforce its unilaterally defined claim line of 1959 as the LAC. I have always said that. The game is 1959. Right? China also appears to have scant regard for various agreements and protocols and ensured peace and tranquility on the LAC for decades. They have no regard. And then Beijing says it has historic rights in SCS after US report. Their history, our history. Massive conflict. They're claiming South China Sea, also parts of Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh because of history and these nomads and these shepherds that may have stepped up one time or two times into that area, right? Where's the big opportunity? The Indo-Pacific opportunity. India must have a clear economic and trade agenda in the vital region, says Rajiv Bhatia. Absolutely right. And here, what is the first thing that's come out is India to export BrahMos to Philippines to acquire 3 batteries of BrahMos. That's a humongously $375 million deal, and it should be extended, I believe, to Indonesia and to Vietnam. Important. And this is the other one. Signal to China, German warships to dock in Mumbai. Germans have finally, after Angela Merkel finally walked off the plank or to one side of the wall, they also know that China is a huge threat, folks. Cheers. So concerns in the periphery include, one is this, concern in Delhi over Myanmar conflict, PLA links with junta to secure Indian interests, officials call for engagement with Naypyidaw. That surely is a case. And the other one is Maldives, right? Whereas what is Maldives? Maldives tries to put an end to India out campaign. This is being run by Yamin and China. And Nepal is the other one that you have, the other point of concern. India's Lipule road plan stirs uproar in Nepal, violation of sovereignty, says parties. You got to keep remembering that China will keep needling Nepal on these issues to bring it out with India. But where they are running into trouble and where all our periphery should take as an example is Sri Lanka. China says no third nation should interfere in ties with Sri Lanka, obviously meaning India. But what happens? Sri Lanka inaugurates India-backed train service during China's Wang visit. Sends a message that New Delhi plays a key role in building infra in Indian Ocean region. What do? Lankan envoy calls to bolster relations in energy and trade. Lanka rules out IMF bailout, seeks loan from China, and it's also requested a loan of $1.5 billion from India. Let's see whose terms are better. Does India come onto the plate or not? Because I got a feeling, folks, let's not waste our money on Lanka, because they're going to take it and pay off China. Bad use of India's money, folks. Bad use. So the most secure relationship for India's standpoint, as far as China is concerned, as far as technology is concerned, as far as its economy is concerned, continues to be the United States, not Russia. Okay. So here we have India could evade US curbs on S-400 deal, signals Biden may discourage Delhi, but they are key geostrategic consideration, and writes Chidanand Rajghata. Then you had this. IAF group captain killed in MiG-21 Bison crash. And why am I bringing this up? Because of our defense production policy. Why are we still flying these flying coffins made in Russia and serviced in India? And that's where really the problem is, right? We should be, and I know that we've just been, the Rafael has been doing a test run on our aircraft carriers, but here I think it's time India made a call of intent to go with an American platform as far as fighter jets are concerned. There's nothing like it after the nuclear deal. This has to be the next big one, folks. When you look at this, everything else we go to the United States. Navy gets 2 more Poseidon 81 warfare jets. US aerospace major looking at addressing India's needs, and then this is what happened, right? India to export mangoes to US import cherries pork. This, I've been advising this verticalization of specific items to trade, right? We got sending out more mangoes, getting in cherries and pork. I would then go sending out chicken breast and getting in chicken legs. And this is the way to go, folks. Government asked Apple to make good worth 50 billion years in India, and they probably will because they're doing really well. US joins India-led International Solar Alliance as 101st member, and this is really, really important. The funding that's coming out from the United States into clean energy is unbelievable. Basic nations oppose EU's carbon border tax. US sign in India-backed solar initiative gets boost. India in talks with top US universities for joint campuses. That's all well and done. But if you run it like Ashoka University and interference with RSS ideology, it ain't gonna work. PM discusses terror supply chains with US Congress delegation. Green push US DFC okays 500 million loan for first solar, and that is going to be coming to India. Glass half full or half empty, writes Seema Sorohi from Washington. He says, but at the same time, not all manufacturing can return to the US. Parts of the chain can shift to safer places like India. Just as soon as India announced a 76,000 crore plan to create a semiconductor ecosystem, there was immediate interest from Intel, the largest chip maker. If India can address concerns around data privacy and regulatory issues, more interest would be generated. US Trade Representative Catherine Tai's visit was productive, and the long joint statement is proof. For starters, Indian mangoes and pomegranates, anars are expected to sweeten the American summer this year. In fact, incredible. Then you have democracy and the US-India relationship. He says, and this is by Dhruv Shivshankar, he says, while both recognize the value of democracy and importance of demonstrating the success of democratic governance, the two differ on their approaches to democratic promotion and coalition building, especially this government. Overall cooperation and democracy ought to come more naturally to India and the US despite their many differences. More than 15 years ago, two very different leaders, George W. Bush and Manmohan Singh, opted to collaborate on the UN Democracy Fund. The intervening years have only injected the issue with greater importance and urgency. Then you have this Democracy Summit, a first step for renewing democracy worldwide by Frank F. Islam. As the two largest democracies in the world, the US and India must be leaders in the renewal process by demonstrating what they are doing within their countries to strengthen democracy and serve as examples for the rest of the world. India really needs to hike its socks up, man. 1 year of Uncle Joe, says Seema Sorohi. How do you revitalize democracy the world over if there is no agreement on principles at home? And this is why India has an opening, right? When only 61% of the population is vaccinated after 2 years of the pandemic because of the rest simply refuse, when parents rebel because they don't want their children to learn about slavery, when election results continue to be disputed long after the election, when errors of omission and commissions take the summit of democracy itself, when you sanction members of Bangladesh's paramilitary for human rights violations but ignore Pakistan Army's brutality against the Pashtuns and Baluchis. Folks, but it was a start. It was a message sent to China. Pakistan may have been, lollipop sent, but then Pakistan didn't intend. Hurting Biden, folks. Hurting the United States. Sending its true intent. The havoc and update in Eurasia, as C. Raja Mohan writes, the Eurasian turmoil, current crises in Belarus, Ukraine, the Caucasus, and Kazakhstan are reshaping the geopolitics of the region. Russia, with its geographic spread across Eurasia, is at the very center of the restructuring. What he writes is, despite the massive economic power, Brussels and Beijing have not been able to lead in resolution of the regional crisis next door. Europe, in Ukraine and China, in Kazakhstan and Afghanistan. In Ukraine, Moscow prefers to negotiate with Washington rather than Brussels. In Kazakhstan, Russia has shown it remains the main security provider despite the considerable economic salience of Russia. What is it? Putin says Russian troops will stay to finish job in Kazakhstan. Then it says Kazakh president blames Afghanistan Mideast ultras for riots. India is very concerned. That's very interesting, right? Pakistan, Tabligis and Afghan radicals fueling Kazakh riots. Important to note this, folks. This Afghanistan is going to be trouble. Although Russia is the weightiest actor in Eurasia, it can't simply reconstitute the former Soviet space unilaterally. An accommodation on European security with the West, covering such areas as Ukraine's independence and neutrality, the de-escalation of the military confrontation in the heart of Europe through arms control, and the development of a cooperative agenda on global security would significantly improve Moscow's chance of leading a new Eurasian geopolitical order. Now just remember, China is nowhere in the game. Eurasia is not going to settle with China help. Let me just tell you. And this is the other important one. Will 2022 be a crunch year for West Asia? The notoriously fickle West Asia is frantic for geopolitical stability. Neighboring India can contribute in the direction by creating new bilateral paradigms across the Arabian Sea, and that's what we are doing, right? The competition between each of Saudi Arabia and UAE for regional economic supremacy may escalate in 2022, for sure as hell. And India is well positioned in both, more so in UAE. India has a long civilizational history with the neighboring West Asia. A comprehensive bilateral symbolic relationship has evolved in recent years. Our current trade with the region is 150 billion and we source over 70% of our oil requirements from it. Nearly 9 million Indians residing in the Gulf remit around 50 billion annually to India. Just remember, not from Iran, right? The investment flow across the Arabian Sea also remains robust. Shedding a traditional reluctance for long-term strategic engagement, India is currently negotiating a comprehensive CEPA and with the UAE, the GCC and Israel. The new Quad, folks. Similarly, defense and security ties are being strengthened through exchange visits and joint exercises. Prime Minister Narendra Modi should be credited for being persistent and consistent in fostering strong ties with West Asia in general and with UAE and Saudi Arabia in particular. It is to be hoped that his planned visits to the UAE and Kuwait next month will create new bilateral paradigm going well beyond 2022. But hey, like I said, UP elections and then 2024 are his bet noir, and that's the 2 steps back and 2.5 steps forward is the problem with West Asia. Otherwise, he would have been far better off today than he actually is, folks. The other calculus in India's foreign policy is obviously Europe. And here 2 events are pretty critical. One is Brexit. That allowed Britain to chart a different path, structure with India, which is always more appropriate because British obviously has a huge role in India's history, and India sings in its domestic politics because of the diaspora there, because of Pakistan. So now having broken away, it can make independent decisions. This is good for India's trade, good for India's defense, and good for India's technology. Europe, on the other hand, the other big event has been Angela Merkel's exit. Angela Merkel always sat on a edge as far as China is concerned. Now, with the change, you can see there's a change in Europe with the German warship scheduled to visit India, and France anyway was pretty clear on whose side it was as far as China and India is concerned, because only supplies equipment, arms and ammunition to India, does not do anything of that sort to China. So here you have that. India, UK to launch talks on FTA today. UK plans to offer deal on visas during free trade talks with India. Glasgow meet accommodates India's concerns on fossil fuels. That was important. This is what Raja Mohan writes. 3 decades after a breakup, in past Delhi's strategic enthusiasm for Moscow was shaped by India's difficulties with the West. Today, a reconciliation between Russia and the West will help India manage its own security challenges. While coping with the complex dynamic of Russia's relation with West has been an enduring element of independent India's foreign policy, Delhi's thinking of Russia has too often been colored by ideological sentiment. While the ideology has been important for both the Soviet Union and post-Soviet Russia, Moscow's international policies have been driven more by national interests and geopolitics. In Delhi, the tendency is to over-determine Russia's contradictions with the West. It is not Russia's national destiny to forever confront the West. Russia's current problems with the West are not about ideological principles. It is about the terms of an honorable accommodation, which probably will happen. Jai Hind.